In classical economics, the relationship between value and availability is governed by a simple, ruthless curve. As a resource becomes ubiquitous, its marginal utility approaches zero. We see this in the paradox of water and diamonds. Water is essential for life, but is virtually free because it is abundant. Diamonds are functionally useless for survival, but remain expensive because they are artificially restricted. By the mid-2010s, the global economy had shifted toward an access model. The friction of transaction was removed. In the music industry, this manifested as the transition from ownership, buying a CD or an MP3, to access, streaming any song anywhere for a flat fee. The prevailing logic among tech CEOs and industry analysts was that ubiquity equals relevance. If you are not everywhere instantly, you do not exist. However, in November 2015, one economic actor challenged this consensus. Against the advice of digital strategists, she erected a barrier between her product and the consumer. She intentionally introduced friction into the transaction. The result was not obscurity. The result was a statistical anomaly that violated the trends of the digital age. This is not a story of talent or artistic merit. It is a forensic analysis of the mechanics of scarcity. It is a case study on how controlling distribution in an age of abundance does not decrease value, it compounds it. To understand the magnitude of the event, we must first establish the economic climate of 2015. The music industry was in a state of managed decline. According to the IFPI, global recording revenues had fallen from a peak of $23.8 billion in 1999 to under $15 billion by 2014. Streaming was the designated lifeboat. Spotify had grown to 20 million paying subscribers. Apple Music had just launched in June 2015. The industry standard contract had shifted. Artists were told that windowing, the practice of delaying streaming releases to sell physical copies, was dead. The consumer expectation was immediacy. Enter Adele Adkins. She was coming off the album 21, which had sold over 30 million copies. However, 21 was released in 2011, a lifetime ago in digital years. By late 2015, the market had fundamentally changed. Physical CD sales were plummeting by double-digit percentages annually. The stakes were quantified by industry analysts at Billboard. The projection was that no album would ever sell 1 million copies in a single week again. The previous record holder, NSYNC, had moved 2.4 million units in the year 2000. That was a time when buying a CD was the only way to hear the music. In 2015, repeating such a feat was mathematically improbable due to the fragmentation of consumption. The prevailing strategy for superstars in 2015 was omni-channel saturation. You release on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and Amazon simultaneously to capture every fraction of a cent. To withhold a product was viewed as leaving money on the table. It was considered user hostile. Yet, reports began to circulate in late October that Adele's team, led by manager Jonathan Dickens, was considering the unthinkable, a total blackout on streaming services. The timeline of events reveals a calculated execution of controlled scarcity. November 18, 2015, 2 days before the release of the album 25, the New York Times publishes a report confirming the rumors. The headline reads, "Adele is said to reject streaming for 25." The report cited 3 people with direct knowledge of the plans. The album would be available for purchase on CD and vinyl and for digital download on iTunes. It would not be available on Spotify or Apple Music. November 20th, 2015, release day. The album drops. The consumer behavior observed on this day was archaic. People physically drove to retail locations, Target, Walmart, Tesco. In the digital realm, they encountered a paywall.
To hear the product, they had to transact $10 to $15 up front. There was no try before you buy via a stream. Spotify issued a public statement attempting to apply soft pressure. Their spokesperson stated, "We love and respect Adele, as do her 24 million fans on Spotify. We hope that she will give those fans the opportunity to enjoy 25 on Spotify very soon." This statement highlights the friction. 24 million fans on Spotify were denied access unless they converted into customers. The results were immediate and shattered all predictive models. Day 1, 25 sold over 900,000 copies in the US alone via iTunes. Day 3, it surpassed 2.3 million copies. Day 4, it broke the single-week sales record previously held by NSYNC since 2000. By the end of the first week, 25 had sold 3.38 million copies in the United States alone. This was 41% of all albums sold in the country that week. To contextualize this number, in an era where music was free, over 3 million people chose to pay for it within 168 hours. Financially, the disparity between streaming and sales is logarithmic. In 2015, a stream paid approximately half a cent. To generate the revenue of a single $10 album sale, a user would need to stream the album 2,000 times. By forcing 3.38 million sales, Adele generated roughly $34 million in gross revenue in 1 week. Achieving this via streaming would have required roughly 6.7 billion streams in 7 days, a statistical impossibility given the user base at the time. As Keith Caulfield of Billboard noted at the time, there is no peer, there is no precedent. This was not luck. This was the mechanical result of a windowing strategy that leveraged scarcity to force high-intent behavior. Why did this work? The answer lies in the psychological principle of commitment and consistency popularized by Dr. Robert Cialdini and the economic concept of price elasticity of demand. By removing the album from streaming, Adele's team reduced the supply of the experience to zero in the low-cost sector. If you view the music market as segmented, streaming represents low-friction, low-commitment consumption. Purchasing represents high-friction, high-commitment consumption. When access is unrestricted, the consumer feels no urgency. The product will always be there. By creating a temporary monopoly on the distribution channel, the team triggered loss aversion. The fear of missing out on the cultural conversation overweighed the pain of the $15 transaction. Furthermore, the act of paying increases the perceived value of the art. This is known as effort justification, a dissonance reduction paradigm in social psychology. When a consumer spends money and physical effort to acquire an object, they are psychologically predisposed to enjoy it more, simply to justify the expenditure. Streaming encourages passive consumption, background noise. Purchasing necessitates active consumption. By forcing the purchase, Adele ensured that millions of listeners were financially invested in liking the album. This strategy is known in film distribution as windowing, releasing in theaters before streaming. The theatrical window captures the high-intent viewers at a premium price point. Adele treated music not as a utility, but as a theatrical event. The lesson here is distinct. Friction is not always a design flaw. In this context, friction was the filter that separated casual observers from high-value customers. To validate the necessity of controlled distribution, we must examine the inverse scenario. 1 year prior to Adele's release, in September 2014, the band U2 attempted a strategy of negative friction. Partnering with Apple, U2 released their album Songs of Innocence by automatically pushing it to the libraries of over 500 million iTunes users. It was free, it was instant, it was ubiquitous. There was zero scarcity and zero friction. The market reaction was violently negative. Because the transaction lacked consent and cost, the perceived value of the music was not just zero, it was negative. It was viewed as spam. Bono later admitted in his memoir that the move was a mistake born of megalomania. By forcing the product onto consumers without a value exchange, they bypassed the psychological mechanism that generates appreciation. The contrast is stark. U2 gave their music to 500 million people for free, and it was resented. Adele withheld her music from everyone, charged a premium, and broke history. This comparison proves that distribution volume does not equal value. In fact, aggressive distribution without demand verification can destroy brand equity.
What does this forensic timeline suggest about the mechanics of value in the current economy? The data implies a counterintuitive framework for value creation. We live in an era of infinite shelf space. The marginal cost of digital replication is zero. The logical conclusion is that as abundance increases, the ability to control access becomes the primary driver of value. This applies beyond the music industry. Luxury goods. Hermes limits the production of Birkin bags to create artificial scarcity, ensuring the secondary market price exceeds the retail price. Information. Substack newsletters and paywalled journalism thrive by restricting access to high-quality information, differentiating it from the ocean of free content. The pattern indicates that gatekeeping, often used as a pejorative, is an economic necessity for value preservation. When a creator or a business voluntarily limits their audience, they are not shrinking their potential, they are qualifying it. They are filtering for the true fans who are willing to cross the friction barrier. The Adele case study demonstrates that people do not value what they acquire easily. The friction economy suggests that the harder a resource is to acquire, whether through time, money, or effort, the more the acquirer cherishes it. In a world where everything is available on demand, the only things that retain a premium are those that are not. Looking at these events, one can observe patterns that appear across industries and personal choices. The data suggests that immediate gratification often correlates with low retention and low satisfaction. Consider the media, products, or skills you value most. The pattern suggests they are likely the ones that required an investment of time to learn, money to acquire, or patience to wait for. Conversely, consider the content consumed via doom scrolling or algorithmic feeds. The friction is zero. Does the value retained match the time invested? The market signals are clear. Unlimited access creates a poverty of attention. Controlled scarcity creates focus. Observing where you permit friction in your own life may reveal what you actually value versus what you merely consume. Adele eventually released 25 on streaming services 7 months later, in June 2016. By then, the album had already sold over 15 million copies globally. The window had closed. The money had been made. The forensic evidence confirms a simple truth. In a noisy world, silence is not empty. It is expensive.